Good morning, everyone. We're just going to wait about 30 seconds for everyone to get logged on, and then we'll get started. And I think I'll get started now. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Business Support Series webinar. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Becky Davison. I'm the Vice President of Marketing here at the Halifax Chamber of Commerce, and I'm your host today. So my career actually started in retirement planning, which seems a little bit counterintuitive, but I've really enjoyed learning about this topic. Planning for retirement can be a tricky subject, but luckily we have an expert with us today to walk us through it and answer your questions. Thank you everyone who submitted questions for your presenter. When we get to the Q&A, please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A box. And our presenter today is Wendy Brookhouse, founder and chief strategist of Black Star Wealth. Wendy Brookhouse is the founder and chief strategist of Black Star Wealth, a boutique financial planning firm with clients across the country specializing in business owners and incorporated professionals. She makes finance fun, and I will say if you ever have an opportunity to have coffee with Wendy, some great ideas will come out. I just had one, was our last official coffee date. Yeah, a coffee date before we got shut down. So welcome, Wendy, and thank you for joining us and sharing your insight with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Becky. I think this is such an important topic, and a lot of times it just gets put on the back burner, if you will, about things that we have to take care of. I'm going to start with a little quiz, if you will, and the number 63.2%. And I wonder if anyone might know what that means. Hint, it is not what your after-tax income or your pre-retirement income, the percent you need. It is actually the percentage of Canadians who do not have a written financial plan, which is a little bit of an alarming statistic. So hopefully by the end of today, you will be inspired. So you are in the right place if you want to get out of the majority and start putting together a retirement plan. And you are a business owner who wants to understand their options, because there are so much more options for us business owners. And also you want to optimize your taxes. And when I say optimize, I don't mean pay more, pay less is what I would say for that. So we're going to talk today about sources of income, 5 business retirement strategies, and then we're going to just show you some next steps you could take. Now, here's the small print. This is not going to be meant to act as legal or tax advice. Everybody is unique. Everyone requires one-on-one attention and tailored solutions, and you should always consult a tax and financial professional before making any decisions regarding your retirement income planning. Yes, as Becky said, I am the behavior and CEO of Black Star Wealth. We are very behavioral-oriented finance because we know that money is more than math. And I invented a solution called the one number solution that actually helps people stay on track with their money and simplifies everything down to, you guessed it, one number. I am a regular speaker. I have written a book called Burn Your Budget, How to Spend Your Way to Financial Freedom. And I have been featured quite regularly. Recently, I was well, not so recently anymore, but I was on the cover of Investment Executive not too long ago. So let's talk about retirement. Let's look at this as a reframe, if you will, because when I talk to business owners all the time, well, you know, a lot of them don't think they're ever going to retire. I don't know that I'm ever going to be able to afford to retire, or I super love what I'm doing. Why would I ever stop doing this? And so let's reframe that, what retirement means. Because like a lot of times now, I'll say, hey, are you going to retire? Are you going to slow down or stop? You know, because there's all kinds of options there. I think of it as, let's look at it as freedom. Let's look at when do I have the freedom to walk away if I want to. Boom, end of story. So it's not necessarily that you are planning to retire, but that at any point, should you desire to say, I'm tired, I'm done, I don't want to do this anymore, that you have the freedom to still enjoy the kind of life you want and not necessarily work. So the first step on our agenda is to talk about sources of income. And I'm going to talk about the traditional ones that everyone has first. And we're going to talk about from the government. There's the Canadian Pension Plan and Old Age Security. On the corporate side, there's employment income, pension benefits, some severance packages that may be applicable, or maybe you took advantage in the past. On the personal side, registered retirement savings plans, tax-free savings accounts, and non-registered investments. You could have any or all of these things. But then when we look at business owners, we can look at corporate investments because we can have life insurance in our corporation. We can have stocks, bonds, ETFs, mutual funds. Maybe we have a holding company. Maybe we have an individual pension plan, which is kind of like a defined pension plan, but more just for you. You might sell your business, or you might have a retirement compensation arrangement. So we're going to dig a little bit into each of these buckets, as I call them, because I think of it during the accumulation phase, we're filling the buckets. And then when we achieve freedom, we turn on the taps and start pulling out an income. So the Canadian pension plan. This is a mandatory program that's meant to supplement the income of Canadians. The normal age that people would do this is 65. It's a massive topic all the time of, should I take it early? Should I take it later? What should I do? So that's something you can do. You can take it as early as age 60, or you can wait to age 70. The average amount that people received in 2021 was about $689, and the maximum amount was $1,203. So what you can see is there's a vast difference here, and that is based on the calculations. It is a function of how much income you made during your years of working, how many years you worked, and what form of income you took. So for example, if you are a sole proprietor, you would still have been contributing to CPP, so you would have that available to you. On the incorporated side, when you look at your compensation strategy, if you took a salary, you were contributing to CPP, so that is still a viable option for you. If you are pursuing a dividend strategy, you are not accruing CPP benefit credits, so that can affect how much you have later in life. Now, if you were self-employed the whole journey you had and never took anything but dividends, obviously there's no benefit for you. But even if you had a time period, like maybe you started later, there are time frames where they will eliminate your lowest earning years. So you may have more than you think, depending on when you started your entrepreneurial journey. And here's the calculator I invented to help people figure out, hey, should I take my CPP early or wait? So what I did is I put out the two things that I think that matter are life expectancy, like how long are you expecting to live, and whether you need the cash right away. But if in this example, what I did is if you were qualifying for a maximum $1,200 at age 65, you can see it here, that would mean you would get $14,400 a year. If you were going to live to age 90, that means you could collect as much as $360,000. Now, contrast that if you waited to age 70. Remember I said they bonus you if you wait, and they kind of penalize you if you don't. So on the $1,200, if you took it early at age 60, you're only going to get $768. So you would actually only receive $276,000 to life expectancy. If you waited to age 70, $1,700 a month. So that almost an extra $1,000 a month if you waited. And if you lived until age 90, you're going to collect $408,000. So the money that you would difference if between waiting from 60 to age 70 and living to 90 is $132,000. So that's not inconsequential. And that really comes down to looking at your family history. How old were your parents? How old were your grandparents? What were their lifestyles like? You really want to dig in. If you need the money now, though, of course, don't worry about it. Just take it early. The CPP is fully taxable and is included as income for you in the year that you receive it. The old age security is, although it is a government benefit, it functions completely differently. And so the CPP you have funded, you took it off your paycheck. The people you worked for contributed as well. It's usually a 50-50 split. 5.1% from you, 5.1% from your employer. It's even higher now because they're trying to increase the contributions. But on the old age security, it is a federally funded program. And there's benefits including a guaranteed income supplement, an allowance, and you cannot take it before age 65 right now. And there are, they do also credit you and give you more if you wait to age 70. The maximum amount you could receive in 2021 was $615 per month. Of course, it is taxable. If you make very low income, and there's some little bit of rules, whether you're a single person, whether somebody is drawing, one of you is drawing OAS and one of you is not, if you're in a couple situation, so there's all kinds of rules there, but you need a super low income to qualify for the GIS or the allowance. However, if you do qualify for those, they are fully deductible, so you don't actually you actually get tax-free money for those side. The eligibility is different as well, and it's usually a function of how long have you lived in Canada. And the magic number there is 40. So if you've been in Canada 40 years, chances are you are going to qualify for the $615 a month. But let's say you've only been in Canada for 20 years, then you would qualify for about 50%. And as long as you've been in Canada a certain period of time, if you decided to retire outside of Canada, you have to have been in Canada a certain period of time before you can take those benefits with you. We talked a little bit about the deferral, but here's what we hear about all the time, the clawback. And that's when you make over $79,000 a year in income. What's going to happen is for every dollar above that amount, they're going to claw back 15 cents. Okay, so about 15%. And you max out at around 125 is where you would have no OAS left at all. So that's some of the planning you'll do with a planner, is like, how can we maximize where you take things out, what's counted for income, what's not counted for income, to try to make sure you don't that problem doesn't become a problem for you. And a lot of people continue working, and that may be you. You know, I may sell my business, or maybe I'm just not going to work as much. But really, since in 2015, 1 in 5 Canadians over the age of 65 were still working. I mean, some people are doing it because they have to. Some people are doing it just because they don't want to draw down their assets, but others are using it as a form of activity and social interaction. So, you know, it's one of the ways that you can help your retirement plan and make sure you have enough money. On the corporate side, we talked about pension and group RSP. Defined benefit pension plan is one of the ones that we see a lot in government and any government organizations and super big corporations. And that is just like it sounds. We know what you're going to receive in retirement. It's usually a function of, you know, maybe your best 5 years times the number of years you've worked times a certain percentage, usually around 2%. And that gives you what you're going to make in retirement. Sometimes they're indexed so that as cost of living goes up, the amount you receive will go up, but they are variable on that. A lot of people, not government, but others, have started going into the defined contribution plan. And that's because then they can control a little bit more of their costs. With the defined benefit as an employer, you have to make sure there's always a certain amount of money in the fund. Whereas with defined contribution, all you have to do is say, I'm going to put in this much, you're going to put this much. You get to decide where the money is invested. So I know how much is going in, but I don't know what it's going to be worth at the other end. For smaller companies, a lot of them will do the group RSP deferred profit share program. And that is because with pensions, there's all kinds of regulation, all kinds of costs to maintain them. So the group RSP can actually be a less expensive way to do that. And when you move into retirement and start taking income, you can do things like annuities. If you had pension money, it becomes a locked-in retirement account or flips into a life income fund. Or if it was in the RSP, we flip into a registered income fund. Those life income funds and registered income funds, you can have choice up to age 71. And at that point, the government goes, we want some of our money now, so you must take some income. And that is always a function of the dollar value of your assets and how old you are. It's based on how old you are is the percentage of those assets that they want you to take in any 1 year. So if you think about it, you deferred income on the way in, and now they want to make sure that they're getting some income tax on the way out. And that means all of these benefits are fully taxable. On the personal income side, RRSPs and tax-free savings accounts are primary vehicles that we hear about all the time. And the RRSP and the TFSA are very similar in the sense that the money you put in them are able to grow and gain in value without being taxed as it grows. I call it's being under the umbrella of the non-taxable side. It is RSPs, you save money on the way in and you pay taxes on the way out. On tax-free savings account, you save no taxes on the way in, but you don't pay taxes on the way out. And so with the RSP, if you were making a $50,000 a year and you put $5,000 into your RSP, what they're going to do is say, oh, we're only going to tax you on $45,000 of income this year. Boom, that's how it works. And so there's all kinds of strategies about which ones make more sense, all kinds of ways to look at it from a number perspective. I sometimes look at it from a behavioral perspective in terms of how to structure those things. The third one is the non-registered, and that doesn't have the umbrella of saving you tax as it grows. So as it grows, depending on the type of growth it has, it will be taxed. So if you have interest income, that will be taxed as regular income. If you have dividend income, it's taxed slightly better. And usually there's a gross up and then a credit. So it's better than if it was interest income. And the most tax advantage at this point anyway is the capital gains. And usually those aren't triggered until you sell a position of some sort. So in all three of these buckets, we can put mutual funds, exchange traded funds or ETFs. We can put bonds, we can put stocks, we can put all kinds of things like that. And each one of those things will, can go in different buckets as well, depending on your overall investment strategy. And the other one for us, all business owners, we can have a holding company. And that is put in place sometimes when our operating company is doing really well. And we know that at some point we're going to want to sell that operating company, or at least have the option to do so. If you have a professional services corporation, or you're a physician or something like that, that doesn't necessarily have a business that's for sale, you know, depending on other qualifications, you may or may not need a holding company. Because the holding company also offers you creditor protection. So when you take the money out of the operating company and move it up to the holding company, it's now out of the operating company, where if something goes wrong, someone may sue you and is protected potentially. After the age of 65, a holding company, if you and your spouse are both owners, it can offer income splitting opportunities. One thing to be aware of with the small business tax deduction limits of $500,000. And a couple of years ago, they came in with this rule around how much passive income your corporation could earn prior to it affecting how much small business tax deduction you have. So even though you set up a holding company and maybe you moved all your assets up there, like they're all making passive income, that is still affecting your operating company totals, because they're going to look at all companies, whether they're arms related or not. So you want to keep that in mind as you build that out. Depending on how you structure your holding company, if you are going to sell your operating company, you're going to want to be very cognizant of how you structure that thing so that you can still potentially have access to your personal lifetime capital gains exemption. And just to be aware too, if you have investments inside your holding company, they will be taxed at the highest bracket. Inside your corporation, so this could be inside your holdco or your operating company, depending on your structures and what's important to you. You can put a couple things as well. So if you're producing a lot of cash and you don't know what to do with it, and you don't need it personally, so you're not going to pull it out and pay personal taxes, here's a couple options. One of which is putting in place corporate life insurance. And what's great about that is it does provide you the benefit of insurance, but with a permanent policy structured correctly, it will build cash value. It's one of the only ways that we can in a corporation have an asset earn income and not be taxed as it grows. And then there's a number of ways we can access it if it becomes a retirement mechanism that we can pull money out. So that's one way we can invest inside the corporation. The other one is to use our regular corporate investments, just like we put in our RSP, our tax-free savings accounts and things like that. We can do that in the corporation. We can set up a corporate investment account. Now, as it grows, it will always be taxed at the higher rate. And we could do corporate class mutual funds. We can do stocks, ETFs. And again, what's interesting here is because it's non-registered in the corporation, your advisor fees may be tax deductible. So you want to really be aware of that. And again, your distributions can affect your passive income rules. So every dollar over the $50,000 of passive income we produce, it eliminates $5 of our $500,000 capital, our tax deduction level. Now, the individual pension plan is super cool. Who would be this might be suitable for is someone who makes or has been giving themselves a T4 salary on a regular basis. Typically, the numbers work best if you are over the age of 45 and that you have really good cash flow and you're not going anywhere for a while. Some people who are getting close, so let's say your company is starting to produce a lot of income and you're now going, oh my gosh, I'm starting to inch above that $500,000 mark. So my money that's over the 500, I'm now paying like 27% tax instead of 11% tax. So what can I do? Well, this may be one of the ways that we can pull money out of the corporation as an expense, set it up into the IPP to keep you underneath your small business limits. So those are tax deductible contributions from the employer. They are typically creditor protected. And what's interesting, it's much like the defined benefit. There's a rate of return that's actually legislated. So this is great if you have a lot of cash, because if your investments inside only earned 5%, the company can actually top that up to make it work. The retirement compensation arrangement, RCA, is another instrument you can use. It's not as popular because it's a little more complicated to put in place. Sometimes how it's all set up doesn't really make sense for people, but for some it does. If you are a high income earner and you're likely to retire outside of Canada, this is one of the mechanisms you may want to use, especially if you want to continue to work and save beyond the age of 71, because you can continue to use this. And you need to have good cash flow and be able to handle complexity. So let me give you an example of who. So all NHL players who are not from Canada and are playing in Canada will probably have this in their contract, because this is the way they can actually save some money and have those contributed to and be able to take it out of the country when they go. So details, no legislated limit on how much you put in. The contributions are tax deductible and the tax is deferred. And as a person as part of it, I don't have to put my own money in. But what's interesting is that every dollar that gets put in, 50 cents has to go to CRA and 50 cents stays in the investment. And as the money grows, so if you had $100,000 in there and you earn $20,000 of some sort of income, then you're going to have to remit 10,000 to the government and you're going to have to keep 10,000 in. So it just sounds very interesting. But once you start pulling money out, the government starts sending back that money. So it's a very interesting, different way of doing it. But it also doesn't affect your RRSP limits or any other pensions. You could be doing this in addition to your RRSP strategies, depending on how you've got all set up. And obviously, you could sell your business if it's a sellable business. Some considerations here are your active versus passive income. And this is where, if you know you're going to sell, you may want to have already set up a holdco, because you want to get the non-active assets out of the business. Because in order for you to qualify for your lifetime capital gains exemptions, you need to have a certain level of active income producing assets. And typically, you don't want to have a whole lot of cash in there as well. If you are someone who has been funding a lot of your lifestyle out of your business, there's this process called normalization, which means that the accountants will go back in and go, well, you know, the normal business owner probably wouldn't do X, Y, Z. So we're going to take that and put that back in, back that expense out. The other big thing is the share sale versus the asset sale. So the share sale is how you get potential access to your lifetime capital gains. An asset sale does not give you that. So this is where people really go back and forth on this, because for the buyer, they would prefer an asset sale, because if they just buy the assets, they're not buying any potential liabilities. Whereas if they do a share sale, they may be getting some of the liabilities. The thing to remember is, if this is on your horizon at all, it's a possibility. Give yourself tons of time. Start working on it now. It's never too early to start making sure that you're positioning yourself correctly from a taxation perspective. How do I minimize my tax? How do I get more money in my jeans? And how do I also make sure that this business is going to get me the best price possible, so that I'll have the most money as well? And that's where I say understand the levers that affect price. One of the best examples I've ever heard about this is thinking about an alarm company. So an alarm company that sells an alarm and goes and installs it is worth a certain amount of money based on their clientele, etc. But if that alarm company also has income stream from monitoring those alarms, that company is actually worth a lot more because they have a regular, reliable income stream coming in all the time. So you just want to understand all the levers that could potentially affect your price. And also being aware that many businesses will want you to stick around for a while and help make sure that the transition goes well. So this is, again, goes back to that give yourself time, if that's one of the points that you want to execute on to get to your freedom. And now we're going to move on to tax planning strategies. It's interesting, the tax planning strategies, so many of them are couple oriented. So if you're a single person, there's a couple options for you, but for the most part, a lot of these are for basing splitting. How can we split our income? So we're going to look at pension splitting, CPP splitting, prescribed annuities, some withdrawal strategies, and again, your holding company. Oh, CRA, our partner in business and life, they have this thing called the progressive tax system. And based on how much money we make, after, for example, in this one, after you make $48,000, $48,535, you move up and you pay extra percentage on all the dollars you make after that. And then the province came in and said, I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to do different numbers just to make it easier for you, right? That was a sarcasm. So none of them match up. It's very complicated, but it just shows you that at different points along the way, every extra dollar you earn is going to attract more tax. And the federal tax are combined with the tax rates, and that's how we figure out how much tax we pay. So the 3 Ds of tax: deduct, take deductions to reduce your taxable income. We talked about the RSP. It is a deduction. It reduces our taxable income. So maybe we've gone down a bracket. And that's when you hear sometimes say, oh, just contribute to your next tax bracket. And what they're saying is, okay, if you're at the 50,000 and the next tax bracket is 48, well, just contribute 2,000 and get yourself down to the next level. Dividing your tax liabilities by taking advantage of income splitting or deferring. How long can we do something and to pay it later? RSPs, again, are tax deferral mechanisms. You might save taxes on the way in, but you're just deferring the taxes. They're going to come at some point. So strategy 1 is pension splitting. And so you can split up to 50% of your eligible income with a spouse or common law partner. And how it works. So let's first, before I go into my example, I'm just going to tell you a little bit. If you are taking money out of an RRSP, even if you're after age 65, that is not pension income. It has to come out of a RIF, Registered Retirement Income Fund. For your RSP and your LERs and everything, you have to be over 65 to split, and you have to have it in the right bucket, the LIF or the RIF. Your pension income, defined contribution, defined benefit, they're different. They can actually be split at a different time. So this is the example of how splitting might work. So say one spouse has a pension income of 60,000 and the other has no income. So if you didn't do splitting, the taxable income, they're going to pay $12,000 in tax. Now, if they were to split that eligible income, and each now has a taxable income of 30,000, so we've split it in half. Then we apply the pension tax credit, and now the total tax bill, instead of 12,000, is just over 6. So you can see the effects of income splitting can be quite profound, and that actually affects your lifestyle in retirement. So you really want to be taking advantage if you have it. CPP sharing. Yes, you can split your Canada pension monies as well. It's different though, and how they calculate it is different. And the thing behind it is the same, in that we're trying to split income so that people are more in the same level, which would be a lower level, and reduce the tax. You must both be receiving CPP, and you must also be at least 60 years old. And the formula is actually based on different things. And it's how long have you guys been together as a couple during the income forming years. So as I always say, if you are married to your high school sweetheart and you're still going strong, you're probably going to be able to split even Steven, no problem. However, if you've only found your ideal mate, later in life, and you've been together for 10 years, and that's 10 out of the 40 years you contributed, you will only be able to split 25%. So you can see it's a little bit of a different calculation that you'll want to work with an accountant. And I have seen instances where it's not a no-brainer. Sometimes you really do have to do the calculations to see if this is a good strategy, because I've seen the splitting actually ended up increasing the tax owed. So again, you want to test these things out. A prescribed annuity. This is for your non-registered money. And a prescribed annuity really does even out your taxes, and it gives you a much more level income and lower taxes in earlier years. So it's really interesting. So a prescribed annuity. An annuity is when you write a check to an insurance company and you wave goodbye to that money because you cannot access your capital again, for the most part. And you typically will say, okay, I would like it to be in my name only. I want it to be joint. I want it to be joint, and I want to go on. If I die, I want my spouse to receive 100% or some percentage of it. I can also ask it to be indexed to inflation. So there's all kinds of ways you can structure that. Every time you add a possibility that more money will be paid out over a longer period of time, they will decrease how much they're going to give you every month. So that's just something to keep in mind. It doesn't mean it's not a good strategy. It's just you want to test all these things out. And payment timing is interesting as well. And that's why one size does not fit all. And you really do want to mock these things up and really take a look at, well, if I took my CPP early, do I take it late? How does that affect everything? Because this is a case study for you guys, is that this particular couple, they had $965,000 in retirement assets split between RSP and a LIRA. And they had a nice home that was paid off, all that good stuff. And so we ran a couple scenarios. And in the first scenario, when we run these scenarios, red is bad. Red means you've run out of money. You don't have enough. And so what we did is we took the CPP and OAS at age 65 and we ran the numbers. And this is what happened. At around age 81, they ran out of money. And then we said, what if we took the CPP later and the OAS later? And then all of a sudden, most of the red went away. So this is where you want to really strategize and test these things out. And the interesting thing about holding companies, although with the TOSI rules, which are related to our propensity to income sprinkle as entrepreneurs, but after age 65, we actually can, with a spouse and a holding company, start doing some sharing on that passive income streams. And we can take dividend income out of that holding co after age 65 and be able to split that. Now, my cautionary tale is I had some clients in my office a year or so ago, and they were 75 years old. They had had a very successful law practice, and they came in, and the unfortunate part is they had already spent all their RRSPs. And as a result, all they were left with was OAS and CPP. And I truly believe it's because of the lack of planning and understanding what they should have done. So that's my cautionary tale. Please do not put yourself in the position where you're dependent on government stuff. So the question, of course, when can I achieve treatment? And then how long am I going to stay active? And how long is that going to be? So on this particular scale, we had a client who wanted 80,000 after-tax income starting at age 66. But if you look at the effects of inflation, that's to buy the same amount of stuff that I could buy at age 66. I now, at age 79, I now need almost $120,000. That's inflation, and that's how that affects it. And you really want to make sure you have that in your plan. When you are going into the freedom mode and you're like, okay, I'm ready, make sure there's some mindset considerations. A lot of these, if you have a pension plan, if you have if you're doing a riffing situation, if all those pieces, a lot of times you're only going to get paid once a month now. So if you've been used to getting every 2 weeks or something like that, and actually you've structured your entire life around every 2-week payments, you may want to shift that, because now you're only going to get paid once a month. The other thing is you now have to make this complete shift from I'm saving, and now I'm going to spend. And that can cause a real shift. And it's so hard because you're like, okay, is it going to last? How am I going to make this last? And it can actually lead to a lot of stress for some people in really worrying about whether their money's going to last for them. Also, taking a look at your current lifestyle And really what I like to do is I like digging deep. Go look at your statements, see how you're really spending your money, analyze it, and then make yourself up a spreadsheet of your current lifestyle. And the second piece then is, well, what do I want to do in retirement? So if you really want to make me upset, you just tell me what percent of income you needed after retirement. Oh, you need 60% of your pre-retirement income. And I'm like, oh, really? How do you know this? Like, so I like to make sure you know an exact number. And that would mean taking a look at your current lifestyle and looking at, oh, what's going to go away? Well, if you're paying for disability insurance, that's gone. If you were saving aggressively, those are gone. If you are no longer traveling downtown or what have you, maybe you don't need as many vehicles, that's gone. And then we're going to go, what's going to stay? And keeping an eye on those. Well, maybe you still have a mortgage. That's okay. But it's there. You want to account for it. The other thing is what's going to come into play. Because if you think about the early years of retirement, typically people are more active. I call it, yeah, you're going to go golfing. Some point in the future, you might travel. I don't know, Becky, maybe they will. And we all remain hopeful that that will be in our plans and that we can actually execute on it. But we want to put those numbers in. And when we add that all up, what that gives us is the amount of money our lifestyle needs in order on an after-tax basis. And that then becomes the number you can do all your planning around, because depending on how many buckets you have and what the money's coming out, some is taxed, some is not. So you really want to play around with where you're going to go. So this is where I say, finish with the numbers. Figure out if you have any gaps. If you have gaps, what strategies can you use? What are the 5 things we talked about today? Are any of those applicable to you, and should they be implemented into your structures and your business? And looking through all those options and making some decisions. The other piece I see is also understanding completely on your investment side of things, how much risk do you need to take? Do you always need to be swinging out of the park on all your stocks and bonds and things like that? Or do you only need to make 3-4%, in which case, why take on more risk than you have to? And of course, we always have to be thinking about our partner, CRA, in our strategies for today in terms of how we're saving and where we're saving, and also in the future, where we're going to pull that money from and how will that be taxed. And so here's a sample plan I put together for potentially an entrepreneur. So they retired at age 60 and they lived off, they took their CPP. Oh, they had a pension plan they took a little early. They had one from an old business. They started taking their government benefits at age 65 that they had, but you can see a lot of it came from cash investments. Then they had some corporate investments, and the orange is actually from borrowing from a life insurance policy. So this is how we would structure a plan for you so that you could see where things are coming, what am I going to do, when am I going to pull it out? And it gives you a lot of certainty. So for example, in this guy, they wanted to have a $240,000 lifestyle after tax, and based on all the assets they had, they could actually have 287, or they would retire earlier, or they could reduce the risk that they were taking in their portfolio. And it also tells us the projected capital that's required at retirement. And so that's kind of also our freedom number in terms of what kind of assets do we need to have the lifestyle we want, should we want to walk away. So your next steps, build and hire your team. Okay, financial planner. And I really do say financial planner, designations do matter. It does indicate how much education they have and the depth they have. You want an accountant, and you want an accountant that's at your level of sophistication that you require depending on your situation, and one who is willing to engage with you beyond the preparation of your taxes. This needs to be a strategy element. And depending on the structures you pull in and how you're going to do it, you may need a lawyer. And if you're going to do an IPP or a RCA, you're going to need an actuary. Fun with numbers. Here, please don't make these mistakes. Think you have lots and lots and lots and lots of time. Please do not use rules of thumb or self-reported data. Please do not forget about the cost of living, meaning that, in 80,000 today, you're going to need 120,000 in 10, 15 years. And, trying to do it all yourself. You're very, very busy. So it might be easier to bring a team together. we have a program that we actually work with business owners and help them figure out their freedom number with a full detailed plan with recommendations. We focus a lot on not just what to do, but how, sales targets in your business, investment and tax strategies. And we have all kinds, and we try and minimize your time so that you can get to where you want to get to. And it includes lots and lots of things. And if you just send me an email, I'll be very, very happy to answer any questions you have that you're not comfortable asking today. But otherwise, Becky, the floor is open.
Amazing. Thank you, Wendy. I took 4 pages of notes. I love that. And I loved your statement about it's not about necessarily retirement, but when do I have the freedom, right? The freedom to walk away and do what you want to do. So love that. So there's some questions here. There's some questions that were already sent in. So
nice.
I'm not sure if you can see those too. Patrick actually mentioned it gets on CPP. I agree. It gets better if you wait. My wife retired at 58 and she was waiting to take CPP and had not maxed out. She finally figured out every year she waited, she would get more CPP, as you alluded to, Wendy. Yeah. But every year she waited, she lost money because she was not contributing. So she finally took it because the benefit was minimal to wait. Does that seem right?
Right. So the government has these formulas that they will reduce and eliminate the years that you're not making money. So if you have children, there should be about 7 years for each child. And there's also up to 17%. So if you've been contributing all the way along and they'd retire at 58, you should still have about 7 years or 6 years of time that they would not calculate into, and it wouldn't reduce your number. Okay. So again, it's a function of where you are. It's not an across the board answer.
Okay, great. My question that I came up with is, you talked about hiring your team and that designations matter. So how do you choose a financial planner like that? Like what do we look for? What questions do we ask?
Well, there's a couple levels there, Becky. First off, I would want to make sure there's a fit because I think of the relationships I have with my clients, and several of them are, a lot of them are over a decade old now. And, I've had some business owners that go, you're the longest advisor I've ever had. And I think of it a little bit as a marriage, right? So you want to make sure that, you get along, you have the same viewpoint on some stuff, that you're not afraid to tell them everything. I call it getting naked, opening up the kimono, because you have to feel comfortable doing that, because that's when you're going to get all the right answers. Do they work with business owners? Have they got a experience running a business themselves? I think those are key questions. I remember I went to a business training session for insurance, and one of the gentlemen at the table, he was an advisor, says, "What's the joint registry of stocks?" And I went, oh, anyway, so I had a little meltdown inside, but I think that someone who understands some of the pressures as a business owner and what unique situations there are would be important as well, Becky. So I think you interview, I think you get referrals, and you figure out, are they doing the work that I actually need to have done?
Mm-hmm. And I like what you said about the RRSPs versus TFSAs. You made that so succinct. I read a book on tax-free savings accounts this summer, 300 pages, and I couldn't have explained it as clearly as you do. So there's that.
Yep.
Back to the questions here. So maybe too specific a question, but here goes. I have a friend who holds shares of a Delaware corporation. They want to change to a Canadian-controlled private corporation. They say that if they do that, I can sell my shares and claim the capital gains exemption of up to $500,000. Does this sound reasonable?
Okay, so there's a couple of things to unpack there. First off, to qualify for the capital gains exemption, it does have to be a qualified small business corporation. So it has to be Canadian. So that may answer the first question. There may be a taxable disposition when they shift. I don't know. That would be above my pay grade, and I would want a good strategic accountant on that. And your capital gains exemption right now is up over $850, closer to $880. So if you haven't used any capital gains exemptions in the past, you may have access to more. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, we'll find out. And then Wendy, if you don't mind me asking, does Blackstar make their money through advice or by buying and selling stock or mutual funds for clients?
Oh,
So
excellent. That's a great question, actually. So I have kind of two sides to my business. And on the planning side, what I don't want to do is make it an obligation that you actually have an ongoing long-term relationship if you just want to plan. So the plan has a succinct separate fee. Should we decide to extend that engagement to cover other things like investments, then depending, we will negotiate that fee. So it's typically, there's an advisor fee put on top of that. That is to cover the time that I spend, understanding and making sure that I am up to speed on the market. It also covers, I have fixed costs just to operate those platforms that I have to cover off as well, but I'm not trying to make that where I make all my money. So it's really about being reasonable, and what is it worth it to do it is more where I focus on that side.
thank you for being transparent about that. That's a great answer. So it's nice to know that when you're going in and having your first meeting about how payment works. So thank you.
Well, you may have an investment advisor you love and they're doing great work, but they don't do planning. So I don't want to try to say, okay, to do business with me, you have to move everything over. That defeats the purpose.
No, I love that. And Wendy and I've talked a lot about, and again, I mentioned having coffee with Wendy, highly recommend, about all your different business ideas and things that are coming out. So very cool. Back to the questions here. Thank you, Wendy, for your presentation. Very informative. My question is selling a business. A lot of times the potential investor or buyers will like to know the total value of the company. Is there a formula, EBITDA, to evaluate EBITDA? That's right. I'm having flashbacks to business school. To evaluate the value of the total business instead of getting it evaluated by a third-party evaluator.
I have to tell you, this is my frustration as well, but it's so different, it seems like, across the board. Depending on, is it an asset sale versus a share sale, can affect that. But I have an accountant that I've done work with who says, a business is this thing that is supposed to produce cash. So they need to know how much cash it's producing is one thing. And then depending on the type of industry, there's usually some sort of multiplier. Is that multiplier put on the EBITDA? Is it put on profit? Is it put on different things? So different industries may have different standards as to where that multiplier is affixed. In my industry, if you have a book of business that is investment based, so you have these clients who have stocks, bonds, mutual funds, it is a percentage. They take a multiplier on the trail or the advisor fees I collect. And so depending on how your business is structured, that could be 2 times trail, it could be 4 times trail. It depends on a bunch of factors. So unfortunately, there isn't. Sometimes a small business sale, a broker will apply some sort of rules of thumb, which we've kind of discussed, I don't really like. But anyway, it could be something that gives you an idea of what it's worth. Depending on the complexity of your business, you may want to engage that third party. Yeah, it costs money, but sometimes it's worth it.
Yeah. Barbara says, do you do discovery calls to determine if there is a fit between us?
I sure do. I should type this in the chat. Bookwithwendy.com. If you go to that website, that will have, it has my calendar there for you to go in. I'm after this webinar, I'm going to go open up some calendar space for Thursday. So people are available on Thursday, but bookwithwendy.com.
And we've got a couple questions here too, Wendy. We've got a little bit more time, so I just thought I'd throw them in there. I guess, when is the best time to start thinking about retirement planning? Is there such thing as too early?
Yesterday, Becky, yesterday.
Yeah, it's like planting a tree. It's like planting a tree.
It's true. I mean, all those things we hear, oh, you should start early, da 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 da. The numbers don't lie about the effect of compound interest and all those pieces. So the sooner that you can start, I have done webinars in the past on, should I pay down my debt or should I start saving? And my answer is both. So you want to get into the habit of saving, because I feel it's a big habit that, it comes off your paycheck, or it's something you automate as soon as possible, and then you don't miss it. You get used to it. Whereas I've had clients who have told me, I'm going to start saving as soon as I pay this off. Well, then there's always another this. So I've come to the conclusion that if you just start a little, it will help. And if we look at our net worth as being our personal balance sheet, and if you have a business, you are more than familiar with balance sheets of being what you own versus what you owe. So if I'm investing and paying down my debt, I'm increasing my assets and I'm decreasing my liabilities. Whether I do it all decreasing my liabilities or all savings or a combo, it affects my net worth the same. So I like to use my net worth as my KPI, my key performance indicator of how I'm doing with my saving for the future.
Awesome. I love this. I could talk about this all day.
Me too, Becky, me too.
How has retirement planning changed, or if, since the pandemic started?
Oh, so when the pandemic started, I basically spent no time planning for anyone because nobody was planning. So what I called that was crisis brain. And I feel like when we were in crisis brain, all of us, this is new. What is it? How's it going to affect me? Is my business going under? Can I keep my business going? What is going to happen here? So what I found was the first 3 to 5 months of the pandemic, that's what we were consumed with, is just trying to figure out how to survive. It was not a thrive thing. It was a survive thing, especially if you had kids at home and you're trying to teach them. There's so many factors that kept you from looking ahead. And what I have found is that starting August, September of last year, we ramped right back up in the planning sense, because now we had a lot more certainties about what was happening. And even during these lockdowns, I'm not seeing the same thing, because you know what? We've been here before. We know what's going to happen. We know the vaccine is here. We know our vaccines are here. We know how that's going to work. We know, hey, if we wear a mask, we probably won't get it. If we do this, it won't happen. Versus if you think back when it first started, and we were washing our groceries, for crying out loud, right? So, there's a lot more things that we know now. So that crisis brain has evaporated. Doesn't mean we're not stressed. I'm not trying to say that. I'm just saying that we're able to look ahead, and we're able to actually think down the road because of that.
No, I love that.
That's how I think it's changed.
Nice.
I think that also, but there's been a big run on life insurance, because people have and disability and things of that nature, in the sense that people really understand now, wow, I could go down for a period of time. How am I protecting myself? How am I building that safety net so that if I become sick and can't work, that I can still support my family?
Right. I've got one more question here, Wendy, and then if there's any other final words you want to add before we wrap up, but what should small business owners consider? And that's a pretty broad statement, so maybe it's what should small business owners consider in the next 12 months?
I'm going to quote the great Stephen Covey, Becky, on this one, and that would be begin with the end in mind. So there's a couple of things I do with that from myself and also for my clients is, let's start painting a picture of what today is and what we want today to be, and what do we want in the future. And then, because in my mind, there's this balance between living life for today and planning for life tomorrow. And there is a balance, and it's a unique place for each person. If you're not as healthy as most, you have a great deal of health issues, well, your tomorrow might be more important than your today might be more important, because your tomorrow is less certain. When you look at someone, who's very healthy or not healthy, but they're not saving, tomorrow could be very bad. So, sometimes I think of big consumer debts, like if we've racked up all kinds of personal credit card debt, I think of that, I've already spent my tomorrow. So how do we get to an even playing field to pass that out? So know where you want to go. And be deliberate about it. And the third thing is, I've started I don't know when I made this switch, but I always used to make sales goals for myself. Oh, here's what I want to make from the top line of my company. And then I realized, wow, Wendy, you should really also be looking at your bottom line, because that's the money that's funding your lifestyle. So I think we sometimes forget to look at the bottom line. before, and we only focus on the top line. So as a business owner, know where you want to go, be deliberate, and make sure that you're looking at all the right metrics.
I love that. I'm writing notes to myself. That's great, Wendy. We're almost at time. Is there anything that you wanted to add before I say my little final piece?
I would say that I would love, I'm always open for a conversation. I love meeting new people. I love hearing about what people are up to. You know, if there's not a fit, there's not a fit, but that may mean that we're going to help each other in other ways. So I always encourage people to reach out, book a time with me. Let's have a conversation and see if we can do anything together or not. And don't wait.
Yeah.
I always say too, the other piece is don't be worried about where you're at. I think of a lot of times people say, oh, I'm just going to fix this up and this up and this up, and then I'm going to come meet you with you. And I'm like, oh, okay. You know, that's what I do, right? So I can help you fix all that stuff. But I equate it to going to the doctor a little bit, Becky. In normal times, if I broke my arm and I had a bone sticking out of my arm, I wouldn't wait for it to be better to go to the doctor. So I think of our financial health in much the same way, and that the sooner you do it, the sooner you will feel less stress and anxiety about your money, because you will have clarity around what you need to do and how to do it.
And I'm sure you've seen it all, so there's no shame in wherever anyone is, right?
There's zero judgment coming from us, zero.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Wendy. It's always a pleasure. I learned a lot today. Like I said, I took a bunch of notes. I really appreciate everyone who's joined us. Tomorrow, we're actually having a webinar on affordable housing that's in sponsorship, partnership with Nova Scotia Association of Realtors. So that's a hot topic today. So you can join us on that. It's on our website, which is halifaxchamber.com/events. If you want to register, we've got events happening all month long into June. So we can be your social network and your education network while we're all still working from home. So what else can I tell you? We're talking about environmental, social, and governance strategies on Thursday. This webinar was recorded, so you can watch it again later with your spouse or your business partner. And again, have a great day. And thanks everyone for joining us today. Bye for now.